And that's one thing that's, I feel like if you could just have one class to change everything, it would be emotional intelligence. Teaching kids how to articulate how they feel, because we're dealing with a whole lot of emotions that we don't understand. And you talked about these kids, they're like how do you know that like we're not allowing our kids to be kids and run around and like ask questions and be creative because the whole system is just geared towards conformity. And that is such a weak system.
Ron, welcome to the World XP podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, and you?
Can't complain. Can't complain. So, for those listening, we just finished recording an episode of Ron's show, and links for that will be in the description. Do you want to tell the people real quickly where they should go to? Normally, I do this at the end, but we'll do it at the beginning this time. Tell the people where to go find your stuff.
Yeah, definitely. If the biggest thing that I say is like just listen to my podcast. Just find me at Don't Mind Me. I Just Have ADHD, where I dive into real strategies and tools for navigating life with ADHD and beyond. You can find that on your favorite platform. I'm on Apple, Spotify, any one of those.
All right.
Um, yeah, definitely.
If you wanna, is there any more to add to the elevator pitch of who you are and what you do? A little bit of the backstory before we hop into everything else.
I mean, we could do that at the end or whatever you think
Let's do
that
it
you
now.
want to
Tell
know.
like tell the people who you are and what you do. And you mentioned the ADHD thing already. But just kind of a little bit of your background and journey, and then we'll hop into the question from the last guest, and then we'll continue our conversation from your show. We're on a roll, and we've completely just put a we've completely just put a speed bump in a completely awkward intro, and that's what the people like to hear, apparently. So yeah, tell the people who you are and what you do.
Nice. So yeah, I'm Ron, your affectionately known as your ADHD guy. I'm a strengths coach. So I coach men that are 40 and above that deal with addiction, depression, or an ADHD, and I help them to break through isolation so that they can become more pro-social, so that they can build deeper relationships, build confidence, and communicate in ways that create real connection. So I have this 5 session coaching experience. It's called the Blueprint, the Connection Blueprint, and it's actually a powerful framework for those men. It's about moving from feeling hidden and stuck to actually feeling seen and supported. I also have a free gift for your listeners, a self-discovery journal designed to help you reflect, reset, and reconnect with yourself in simple, practical steps. You can grab that at youradhdguy.com, all that stuff. And if you're really interested in that coaching, it's under youradhd.com, the personal development side.
All right. Well, thank you for that gift as well. Obviously, link for that will go in the description as well. And so the question from the last guest, I think, will kind of give us a great segue into the rest of the conversation. But he says, "What is the risk you wish you would have taken?
What is the risk, like now or, early
Any
on in life?
risk that you're like, oh, I should have done that, but you didn't."
So I've said like recently, I would say the risk that I should have taken recently is, so I work at a chemical plant and um there's this line that's kind of duct taped up and I just don't feel comfortable running that line. Um, so I we have this thing called stop work authority. And I told him I didn't feel comfortable. So I had like 3 managers come up to me and basically tell me my reasons for not wanting to run that line were unfounded and giving me a list of reasons. And I kept coming back to, well, I don't feel comfortable running that line with duct tape and zip ties holding it together. Like, I don't know who would think that that is a good idea. But, I ended up, and they went over the same thing 3 times, and I kept telling them, like I don't know if you're hearing me, but like that duct tape is like a no-go. But the way that since they had everyone, even the SHE managers who's supposed to be on my side, was there co-signing. So I felt like I had no other choice but to run that line. So that's one thing that if I could go back, I would have held stronger because like I wasn't completely sure about like, hey, maybe I don't have it within my rights to say no. It just seemed like it was, I had no other choice.
Hmm.
And, I ended up calling OSHA the next day and explaining them the whole situation. And, they were like, I was like, dude, can I not work, can I not run that line if I don't feel comfortable? And he's like, I wouldn't do it. And they were like, if, and I just told him word of mouth,
Yeah.
so I was like, if this guy does, so yeah, I was like, and if he said, if they give you any trouble or if they about it, call us back. We've got you.
Yeah.
So definitely, I wish I would have held my ground because like, it's not just about me. It's about all the other people that are running that line, risking themselves. And I was running acid at the time. So like, yeah, we got safety showers and all that, but I don't want to have to get in a safety shower. I don't want to have like this should not be a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fix your equipment with the right hose.
Oh, yeah. Did it get fixed eventually? Or still
No,
duct tape?
it's still messed up, and
Oh,
I
good.
don't know what OSHA's doing, but they said that they're trying to get in contact with the one SHE manager, and I tried to give them the right number, but it's gonna get, hopefully, I'm hoping
Yeah.
OSHA has some sway, or maybe they're gonna try to explain to OSHA like what they tried to say to me. Like, yeah, it's okay. Well, good luck with that.
All right. So let's
I'm
dive.
not
So
running it.
yeah, I feel that. So for people listening who don't know anything about ADHD or any of these other things, can you just like give a broad definition of ADHD, both from the perspective of like this is what the textbook says, but like also how it manifests in daily life?
Yeah, and the textbook is, still something that's like I feel like they don't really truly understand. Like a lot of the better explanations have gone along the lines of, there's two different types. Well, actually there's three, but there's the inattentive and the hyperactive. So inattentive could be just, they have a tough time, you know, responding. It seems like they're unresponsive. They're quiet. Um, like there's a lot more internal things going on where they don't feel confident. There's a lack of eye contact. And with the hyperactive side, it's more like interrupting people. There's like a lot of fidgeting, a lot of impulsivity, a lot of and a lot of it comes with inside that combination. So
Mm,
there's this whole spectrum of people that show up in different ways, and some people need medication. I would say a lot of people actually really don't need medication. They just need the right tools. With the combination, it could show up in a lot of different ways, but I feel like the one thing that connects it all is like that emotional dysregulation and that distraction. So with ADHD and just breaking down that name, it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There's a lot of things wrong with that description. For one, we don't have a lack of attention. We actually have an abundance of attention. Like it's like a squirrel, like, oh, a nut, like there's another shiny thing. Like I can't like focus on just one thing. It's all over the place and it's scattered. And even with the work that I've done, like it's still I've realized like the limitations of like I can get distracted very easily. Um, especially if the thought pops up in my head. And the reason why I used to interrupt people a lot because like not because I was trying to be rude, I just didn't want to forget what I was saying. So I was just like really excited to get it out because I knew that I probably wouldn't remember it and I wanted to say it because I felt like it was important. But now that I've worked on with mindfulness and active listening and with character strengths, it has helped me to create that space to realize like, hey, maybe I may not need to say that, and if it's important, but if I'm not listening, I can't actually have a real conversation moving forward.
Yeah,
I hope
I've
that like
experienced, yeah, no,
kind of
that helps.
answered it.
I've experienced that a lot with people very close to me, like wife and friends, where like I'll be in the middle of a thought. I'll be like, hey, just let me finish the thought. She'll be, I'll forget what I'm gonna say. I'm like, okay, you say it. Um, so yeah, I've seen that quite a bit actually. Do you hear? So I've seen on the internets, right, the reels and TikToks and stuff that go on where people talk about the difference between adult ADHD and and children. And I was talking to a friend of mine who works as a therapist. She was saying like everybody wants to be diagnosed with ADHD and autism, and half these dudes don't have it, or not dudes, people, half these people don't have it, but they all come to
Yeah.
me and tell me that they have it. And even with like kids, like we were talking on your show, the kids that I coach, like a lot of them are like, "Oh yeah, this kid has ADHD." I'm like, "Do they, or are they just a kid?" And it's like it's tough to tell
Yeah.
sometimes for me. And what you said about most people, or not most people, but a lot of people not actually needing meds, I think is good because we've seen these issues with kind of the pharmaceutical industry in the last 10, 15, 20 years of various lawsuits and things that have popped up. Like I just had somebody on the show recently who got misdiagnosed with bipolar. I know bipolar is a different thing than what we're talking about, but she's on meds for like 18 years and then she's in rehab for a different thing, had a reaction to one of the meds, they took her off the meds, and all of a sudden the problems go away. And it's like, for what? Like what? Like you drug people just ruined 18 years of this person's life. And so for
Yeah.
me, putting a kid on like Ritalin is like it doesn't sit well with me. So I like that you said most of the time they don't actually need the meds, but like just talk to me through this kind of this cultural phenomenon. Like ADHD wasn't a thing that was on my radar 5 years ago, really, and now I feel like it's everywhere. And
Yeah.
not that people don't have it, but like just talk me through kind of the things that you've seen because I'm sure you get a lot of that. Like, oh, do you actually have it, or does this person actually have it? Like, what does it even mean? Like it's tough for some for me to wrap my head around it as sort of is this just a fad and then in 10 years nobody's gonna have it anymore? Like,
Yeah. No, I totally get where you're coming from. And, to talk about that is like, I feel like ADHD is just looked at, it's talked about on a superficial level. It doesn't really go deep into what it actually is and trying to understand it. But before like I address that, it's like I want to make it absolutely clear. Medication does help. It has helped so many kids. Um, that get the right diagnosis. Now that's where the problem lies is like a lot of doctors, especially with all adult ADHD, don't have the they don't have the right questions. They're not asking the right questions, and some of the questions are geared towards making people seem like they have ADHD. They could, but it's not to a point where they're being it's limiting their lifestyle. Like they're totally disabled in like how they can function as a normal human being. that's when you need the medication. So with children, like it's awful because it's like these companies are preying on that fear of like mothers, and I even like to, have a whole series on that. And I talked to my mom about that and how she, and I wasn't put on drugs, but there was still that guilt there from the parents of like, did I do the right thing? These all these doctors are telling me I need to go on, and that was before the pharmaceuticals, big pharma was pushing these things. So it's like, and the difference between child adult and adult ADHD, like I feel the biggest difference is this the that it's the adaptations that adults have made to fit into society that are the difference. And you talked about these kids. They're kid like who how do you know that like we're not allowing our kids to be kids and run around and like ask questions and be creative because the whole system is just geared towards conformity. And that is such a weak system. Like our diversity is our strength. And that's really call ADHD is just a different operating system. Like it's parts of our brain have just been underdeveloped and overdeveloped. Like the emotional regulation part for us is like we feel, and I feel like it just boils down to one thing. And this is just my theory. And it's actually Dr. Gabor Mate kind of like he has this theory as well. Is like that we're just all sensitive people. Anybody with a like these ADHD or autism or just sensitive people that we're dealing with some type of stress during during our pregnancy or during when we were being born, um, that the mother was going under. So that affected the brain development of like parts of our brain. So one part of the brain got underdeveloped and another part got overdeveloped. And
Hmm.
since we're sensitive, more highly sensitive to feeling emotions and and that's a good thing. But in the society, it's not. We don't want to talk about emotions. We don't have the language for that. And that's one thing that's I feel like if you could just have one class to change everything, it would be emotional intelligence. Teaching kids how to articulate how they feel, because we're dealing with a whole lot of emotions that we don't understand, just the normal person. And if you could open that door of like, this is how I feel. This is why I'm not doing the homework. This is why, I stood up on the desk and, but instead we just punish them for this behavior and isolate it and see them as a problem. Still, when you have all these resources and available, especially with the current administration, it's like it's incredibly disheartening and um, scary. But it's also I feel like when you start attacking something, it makes it stronger. So I feel like there's an opportunity there.
Mm. Yeah, I think well to the autism point, I think there's a lot of stuff around autism at the moment that we don't really need to dive into, but I think with vaccines and other stuff, whether that's true or not true, um, I think remains to be seen. But it does have that stigma around it. And but that's
Yeah.
another product of the pharmaceutical industry, which has had its problems. And I don't think that that's controversial to say that big pharma has had its problems over the last decade or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Um, in terms of the
I mean,
administration, it does feel very haphazard. And I think, right, everybody has identified the problem that you've just laid out, which is like we don't like kids cannot be kids past the age of like 5 because when they go into school, 5, 6, whatever it is, when they go into the public school system, I don't think that that's controversial to say. You've laid it out on the show. I've had a guy, this guy Ryan Allday, who is he helped found this this school called Apogee Nova, which is kind of like a Montessori type where they bring in instructors from all over the place. They take the kids on hikes and outside, and they teach them how to build mini
Awesome.
businesses and to be emotionally intelligent and all these things. It's more Montessori style, and there's a big rise in homeschooling, and so I think everybody has identified the problem, right? People are not happy. Like if you go look at like 2, 3 years ago when there was these parents being arrested or being designated as domestic terrorism when they would go to the school board meetings, right? And
Mhm.
not only is that absolutely bananas, but
Yeah.
everybody has identified this problem. So now that we've all have agreed on the problem, now is what do we do about the problem? And I think
Yeah.
that's where people are differing. And so the administration has one approach, and other people have another approach, which is to homeschool. Other people have another approach, which is to send their kids to a place like Apogee, or to Montessori schools, or to private schools, or to Catholic schools, or whatever the case may be is. And I think we as a society are kind of I've said this a lot on the show, especially recently, where everybody's like, yes, this is a problem, but I don't like what's being done about said problem. And to me, it's kind of like, well, we've had these institutions built for so long, they've been established for so long. If you're going to get rid of them, which everyone agrees is a problem,
Yeah.
there's going to be some weird stuff that's going to happen, right? Something has to take its place. There's going to be things that are fighting to take its place. There's going to be some weirdness. People are going to have to do their due diligence. It's going to be a Wild West kind of scenario. I say this in terms of the financial sector. I say this in terms of
Mhm.
the media sector, right? Legacy media is kind of like Fox, CNN, MSNBC kind of crumbling. People are like, these guys, why? Like, if you ask anyone our age and under, if they listen to the news, nobody listens to the news because they all know that they lie all the time. And so there's
Yeah.
going to be a new one that takes place, right? So certain people are like, oh, Rogan is the next best thing. And other people are like, oh, I don't like what Rogan is doing about whatever thing. And so I
Yeah.
feel like this is another part of that where I would ask or implore people to say like, hey, let's not be fighting immediately after we've all identified the problem. Like different people have different ideas. You can disagree on these things, but we're gonna have to try some stuff and we're gonna have to see if it works or not. And so for this administration, not to you in particular, but to people listening, like, well, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like this thing, but I also don't like what this administration is doing about it. It's like, okay, well, you don't like the thing. They're trying to do something about it. It's only been what? It's not even been a year since since they've come into power.
Mhm.
So, like, I don't like the optics of a lot of it either. But also, let's see what happens, right? We've all agreed that things are not going well. So, like, let's see what happens. Um, so anyways, I just would implore people to kind of consider it from that perspective. Like, I'm with all of these people, man. It's like things are tough out there, but
Yeah.
immediately going to like, well, this isn't gonna work either. It's like, well, you don't know that. I don't know that. Nobody knows that. Time will tell. And anyways, um, complete rabbit hole. But to go back to the kid thing is like they're just kids. I'm not gonna give a kid meth, which is what's in Ritalin or Adderall or these other things. Like it just is ridiculous. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like the phone thing and the social media, like the dopamine hits constantly going is a big part of that as well. Oh, that's what it was. In relation to the theory about the mother going through stress. I don't disagree, but I think there's a lot of other things that go with that as well. Um, and anyways, to the point being, so from you deal more on the adult side. So how did you, one, kind of go through your own sort of journey through this, and two, then you actually made the leap to like, I'm going to coach people or I'm going to help people deal with this, or I'm going to do my podcast, which requires some form of focus, right? I've just gone on like a 7 minute tangent about whatever, and you're still here, right? You've not checked out. So how was your own journey going through all this, through all these things and figuring out that it was ADHD, and then now that you figured it out, right? the same thing. We have identified a problem. What do we do about the problem? How did you kind of go about that for yourself?
Yeah, and to your point, you're not wrong. Like, and there needs to be. I don't know if tearing down the system is right, but it definitely needs to be updated, and
Hmm.
there definitely needs to be a lot more inclusion in that conversation. And that's part of so what you're asking is, how did I get on this journey that I am like
Hmm.
on right now? Like, so I mean that's like kind of a long um story, but I guess we got time.
Yeah,
So
we can piecemeal it as well. Like we can, however you want to answer. We got time.
so like I just want to like talk about this part, like, because I feel like my journey really began towards that recovery by admitting that I was an addict about
Mm.
6 years ago. And that happened because like I was on the streets and homeless for the second time. I was actually sleeping on the mall, the National Mall in DC, and it was just it just wasn't any fun anymore. I like
Being being homeless doesn't seem like it would be fun.
Yeah, it just lost all of its appeal. And you're talking to a guy that could just didn't believe at one point that I could go through a day without smoking weed. So like that, because I've tried it and it was just so hard. And of course I did other drugs along the way, but that's like to me that's kind of beside the point, because it goes along that journey. I was able to find this foundation that helped me to really open up the door to look at myself on a deeper level, and to find out that actually have ADHD. And that came from fear, that came from pain. Like, I was about to lose my job because I kept running into stuff and smashing company property, damaging that, and hurting myself. And finally, it just got to the point where I knew I was going to get walked out if something else happened. So I started to seek help, and I went to my practical. I mean, my general practitioner, and I was like, I'm struggling with this. Like, I need help. I'm desperate. I can't slow down. And I kind of had to lead her into that diagnosis of like, maybe I have ADHD. So I had like kind of the opposite experience with with because I feel like adults, that's not in the diagnosis. Like, they talk about anxiety and depression, which is usually that's an underpinning of ADHD from what I've learned later on. But in that journey, I was able to find the therapist that I have today. Um, and going through that, and one of the first things that he told me was like, this can be a strength. I felt broken. I felt like I was always like, felt like I was normal. So it was like, man, like, what's wrong with me? Like, it was just this whole divided identity, which I was starting to build in recovery. But I was also like, didn't understand the importance of like focusing like that's a part of my identity as well. I didn't have as much acceptance initially. Nobody does. It's like we're in a society and we're so kind of brainwashed about that society that we don't see um the system that we're actually in. And we don't want to be known as like, hey, I was tricked by this, or I'm just a product of this. That's a hard pill to swallow. But I was able to go deeper through that self-honesty and that self-acceptance through that process. So I finally was able to, like, I got a different position at my job, and again, the same issues were showing up because I felt like I was fixed. I stopped seeing my therapist at that time. And yeah, Like I kept damaging company property. I smashed into like a reinforcement concrete pole, busted that down. Like I was getting puncturing drums and getting chemical, like not really dangerous chemical, but like spilling chemicals all over the place with this just going so fast again because I needed to get these jobs done. I needed to prove myself. I needed but I didn't see it that way at that time. So again, I was about to get walked out, and I was going back to see my therapist at that point. I was really trying to slow down. So I had to make a choice. And that choice was to step down from that role because I knew that like that distractibility was something that I couldn't control and that I needed, I shouldn't be operating heavy machinery in a tight space around dangerous chemicals. Like something was bound to happen. Um, but it was the best decision that I made. And along that journey, I was started to invest, like to really just kind of look into, other options. And one of those options was developing my own podcast about mental health. And then I was like, you know what? Let me niche that down to be like more about ADHD because I know more mental health is just so broad. Um, you know, I felt like there with ADHD in the workplace, there wasn't a lot of people really talking about that and talking about solutions to that. And like what were those? And it was very interesting along that journey. And part of that led me to coaching. Because with with that journey, I was actually taking a bubble bath one day because I was like really into this mindfulness and I wanted to, really relax and treat myself and, just, we don't do that enough for ourselves. And I definitely am, you know, a like I still struggle with that, trying to develop a business and have a full-time job. It's and ADHD, like I still get obsessed over things like this needs to happen and I need to do this and I need to, and I put a lot on my plate. So with the coaching, like that day in the bathtub, I was like, I wanted to listen to a podcast, but I didn't want to listen to one that I had to like, because every time I listen to a podcast, I got to write down like these little things. I didn't want to have to do that because I'm in the bathtub. So I listened to this one called the Happiness Lab. And, along, along in that led me to an episode that talked about being more social as an introvert to be more happy. And that really resonated with me because like I'm an introvert and going through that process of trying to talk to different people, I it unlocked this this realization in me that I actually do want to connect with people. Like, and it gives me such an empowerment, especially when I'm able to talk about my ADHD or I talk about my struggle. Like I'm depressed, I'm feeling sad, or I'm afraid, because we don't talk about those things specifically enough. We kind of skirt around it, like I'm anxious or I'm stressed. So it was like once I found that empowerment and that that took time to develop. I went out to this Comic-Con in Pittsburgh and I actually met Danny Glover and other celebrities and talked to him about ADHD. Like I talked to a bunch of people in that, like about mental health. Like you don't, these people didn't go there to talk about that, but I actually had some really deep conversations in that space, and I felt so empowered from that. So I was like, you know what? This is working so well for me. Like, let me see where this goes, and I want to be able to teach other men how to do that. That are felt stuck just like me, because I felt like it was because I wasn't in a romantic relationship.
Mm.
That I was feeling lonely and isolated. And that was a part of it, but it was more about like I didn't feel like I could connect with people on a deep level. And that's where I felt trapped. And that's where I felt a lot of my depression was coming from. So once I started doing that, I noticed that my depression wasn't as strong. It's still there. It's still like always s- shows up here and there, but it's like I always use this example is like when you're not doing the work and you don't have the tools, especially to manage that depression. It can feel like you're in on an ocean on a raft or like a little skipper boat. When you start doing the work and developing these yourself, you still feel that depression, but you're more like you're on a yacht and you're just standing there's the depression and there's so much of a buffer in between it. So
Mm,
that's really what, I've found and experienced through this process.
gotcha. I want to touch on the homeless part because, well, I've not had a person who's been homeless before, or at least that they've told me they've been. Maybe there's one or two. No, I don't know. But it's been in the news a lot the last couple of years. Um, you got one side people saying, well, why don't they just get a job? And then another side saying, well, they can't get a job because they're addicts or whatever. What was your experience personally? And then also, what did you see with those kind of around you? Because even when you drive through DC, you see kind of these like tent communities and under overpasses and things like that. What does your community like? What would you tell people that have no idea what it's like? Like, give a summary of of the situations that you encountered.
Yeah, being homeless myself.
Yeah, and the others that you see, like what are some of the situations from yourself? Like, how did you end up there? But also others that you maybe would have interacted with in a similar situation.
Yeah, and I feel like it still boils down to that society thing and it's that addiction that you know because I didn't feel like I fit in and that emotional dysregulation was is kicked into the point where I felt like I needed something to supplement that. And all the only thing that really did that was weed for me. So that helped me to in the beginning to really just push those feelings down and distract myself from those feelings and not feel as depressed and not being able to admit, I wasn't able to admit that I was depressed to a lot of people growing up. So it started and the thing is with that job part is like I actually had a job and I was still homeless because I got kicked out of the one place that I was staying in because of whatever. It was like it wasn't a good environment and um for me it's like I'm glad that experience happened because now I can relate to those people. It's not the fact that they can't get jobs. That could be part of it. It's more about the fact that they can't stop using they have all this trauma from childhood that they've never been able to process. They've never been able to understand. They haven't been taught how to dig into it and go deeper with it. So it's like that's the best that they can do. They can't hold a job probably because they don't see themselves as having a problem or they don't, it's a rare thing to not conform. It's a rare thing to look at yourself on that level and say, look, maybe I got everything in life wrong, and and I'm like 40 years old or 30 years old or 50 years old. Like the older you get, the harder it gets to admit that to yourself if it ever happens. And unfortunately, a lot of these people never get to the point where they can get help. And from my own experiences, like I just could in this system, I couldn't do it without realizing that, admitting to myself I needed help. I had to get to the point of being down on my knees and my mom telling me, you can't come here. I'm only going to give you Like the only support that I'm going to give you is in gift cards to Giant. And she couldn't trust me with money. She didn't let me in my house, in her house when and she the biggest thing that really changed for me was when she said there's a homeless shelter you can like that was so humbling. Like, and it's not like I hadn't been homeless. Like it was so strange for me because in my head like that it wasn't really like me being homeless. It was more like me just being on an adventure or something crazy like that. And I ended up like I was living in like a condemned school in outside of Philly at one point. Um yeah, I lived in in this metro like I don't know what it's one of those facilities where they have all the like you see them behind the metro stations and
Hmm.
it's like fenced off. Like somehow I was able to get into that building and I had like a whole lot of my stuff in there and I finally got like found out by the cops because I was like snoring. So I was like living it up in the winter with it. So it was just I'm thinking back, it's like, man, like why did I even think that that was that was a way of living? And I was telling other people I was like sleeping on somebody's couch. So I was so embarrassed by the time like I actually the cops then and the cops were really nice about it. Like they allowed me to pick up all my stuff and take it out, and they even took me to a homeless shelter. So it could have went a lot different. Um, so I'm grateful for those experiences because I understand like when you're dealing with these people and that came from that trauma that I wasn't able to explore, that I didn't think, that I thought I had the answers. You're talking about people that think that have been failed by the system at an early age and and they're just living the best that they can. So it's like, I try not to give homeless people money. Um, I try to give them like food or, I'll go out and buy them a meal. It's
Hmm.
not, I wish I could do it more often, but I feel like that's a lot better for them than anything.
Yeah.
It's just having that empathy of like they're human beings too, unfortunately, and they have a mother, they have a father, they have a family that, cares about them. They just don't know how to help them.
Yeah. I had one kind of instance where, because I would do the same as you, try to buy them food or whatever. And I had one instance where there was a Chipotle nearby, and I was like, okay, Chipotle is a lot of food for not a lot of money. And the guy
Yeah.
was like, I don't like Chipotle. And I was like, wait, are you for real right now? I'm about to buy you food. Uh,
Hey,
but when you
no, I
say
get
like
it.
you were thinking back and but it that did put a bad taste in my mouth. I was like, are you for real right now? I bought him something else, but still. Um, when you
No, I
said you
get
were,
it. I get
yeah,
it.
when you said you were thinking back and you're like, oh, why did I think that this was a good idea? Have you ever done that? Like gone back into like sometimes I'll do that, be like, why did I think that that was a good decision? I'll like think back and I was like, what was happening at the time? This is why I think this. This is why I thought that. Have you ever done that before for that experience, or was everything kind of a blur because of the weed and the drugs and everything else? Like, have you been able to reflect on that or not really?
Yeah, I feel like, it's weird because you think like once you stop using, like those memories would be so fresh and raw and like I actually get more like because the fog is starting to lift and and I'm doing the work and I'm allowing myself because I feel like the brain does a bit of repression of memories, and it does that in a way to protect you because there's still memories that I don't remember that, but I remember before that. So, yeah, I do understand the thought process behind it, and it was driven a lot by the ego that I had at the time. And that's an interesting thing about the ego is like a lot of people think it's like it's a bad thing or you can't show too much of it. It's actually just the way you interact with the world, and the ego is important, and you can have an ego that is has more humility, but it's always going to be on that self-centered side because you got to look out for yourself. You're the only one that how you feel 100% of the time. So it's like there is a bit of, and I've learned in recovery, you've got to be that self-centered about your own recovery because you can't help anybody else, especially when you've shown you can't even help yourself. Like, and that was a big lesson for me because, like, I actually do enjoy helping people, but if I'm not giving them, if I'm not taking my own advice, like, how am I really helping anybody?
Mm,
When I don't know that the things that I'm telling them is going to work, and everyone's different. Everyone, like I said, everyone's brain operates different. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned along the path is like that, hey, even if we both have ADHD, that don't mean that we think the same or the same type of management style is going to work. It's like maybe parts of it can, but a lot of it is individualized. And that's where I come from coaching is like what do you need? What will
mm,
work for you? I know this worked for me and you can try it, but it's like it's probably going to be a variation of something else,
yeah.
and maybe you might find something that works for you over here because that's where your strengths are. Like my strengths are in love of learning, creativity, honesty, and forgiveness and critical thinking. So like being able to find out what your strengths are. And that was where it was kind of broke away from recovery because a lot of it is focusing on your character defects and changing that. And that goes back to the system of like, what's wrong with you? What can you fix? You're not like as good as Susie over here or Bobby, like, yeah, you want to change those things and you want to get better, but it's easier to do it when you come from a strengths lens. So when you're starting to look at like, what can I bring in? How does my brain light up when I do certain things? Like especially when creativity and love of learning are combined, like my brain is like, and I've got to watch that because I can overuse that strength. And when I get excited about something, I'm like, yeah, I can do this, this, and that. And then I put all this stuff on my plate and then I'm burnt out.
mm, hmm. Did you have any, like looking back and reflecting, were there any off ramps where you could have maybe not ended up in the scenario that you did that you can think of? Like if you were giving somebody advice, maybe who's dealing with a whole bunch of difficult things and they're going down a similar path, like is there an off ramp that maybe you could have taken, like reflection, right? Hindsight being 2020, that you would have been like, yeah, it would have been better if I had gotten help here instead of waited for this other thing to happen, or if I had, I don't know, whatever the example is in that scenario.
Yeah, I would say like the biggest thing, at least when it comes to help, is like just give it a shot. Don't come into it with an open mind. Like, especially therapy or, anybody trying to help you. Just try it out. Give it an honest, your best shot. And like if it doesn't work out, you can say, okay, well, you don't like it's at least that you tried it instead of just dismissing it because you don't believe in it or you don't trust it or it hasn't worked before. If I didn't give my therapist that open mind and anything that I'm trying, that open mind, like none of it's going to work. Like I have to be able to at least trust it to the point of like, okay, I'm gonna try it out and see how it works. Little and start out with little things. Like The other thing would be, is just go at your own pace. Like, don't try to conquer, don't try to climb Mount Everest on your first hike. Like, start out with a small hill. Start out with something you can win because like when you go after those mountains, it's going to take a lot more than you actually have right now, especially if you haven't climbed a mountain before. So it's like you need those wins. You need the especially if you got ADHD, and I do recommend like the help, like coaching and just understanding like you're better off getting the help than trying to do it on your own. But also, I implore people to make those mistakes. Like giving yourself permission to make those mistakes has been something that I'm still cultivating on my own. Is like because those mistakes like help me to learn. And when I don't allow myself, the more mistakes I make, the better I get. The fact it's weird. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually so freeing because like once I start trying to do things right and perfect, it my learning gets smaller and smaller and smaller and it just becomes that shame spiral.
Hmm.
Just it's so easy to go down that. So I would say I know that's a lot there, but the biggest thing is just being open to, open-minded to the help that you're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point about the permission to make mistakes, that's exactly what we talked about on the episode on your show, which is when I'm coaching, it's like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? Then there's no defender to take the ball. You
Yeah.
can make mistakes. Make the mistake. Try it at 100% speed and don't be afraid to make the mistake because there's no like you're going to learn from it. Um, so when you started
Definitely.
coaching, do you have so I'm asking this very short question to preface the next one, which is do you have like certs or anything or like that you've gone through to start coaching?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of getting a MBSP certification.
Okay.
So that's mindfulness-based strengths practice. Um, so that's what I was talking about with that mindfulness and
Yep.
character strengths, being aware of your character strengths in a mindful way. So like one without the other isn't as good as when they're combined. So it's like things like active listening, and we all have strengths, and we're all using them. We're just a lot of times we're just blind to those strengths, or don't have the right language, or like say, a lot of people, when you ask them what their strength is, like they'll be like, "Well, I'm good at soccer," and it's like that's not a strength per se. Like what make and in order to dig into that, what makes you good at soccer? What
Mm,
are the things? Because that's so general. Like it's more like, and it takes multiple strengths to be good at soccer. It takes teamwork. It takes, social intelligence. It takes leadership. It takes perseverance. It takes a lot of different things. It takes love of learning because you got to learn a lot of different things. So and being open-minded, so having that critical thinking, especially if you want to grow, because it's like if you continue to make the same mistakes and you're not willing to be coached, and that humility to learn, to know that you've still got stuff to learn,
yeah.
so
Yeah. Always there's always more, right? If you go into every conversation with the assumption that the other person knows something that you don't know, then the curiosity will be there because there's always something to learn from everybody
yeah.
that who's out there. Um, the follow-up to the cert question is, so how did you develop your kind of coaching philosophies, right? Because I think there's a lot of people, or you see this on the internet a lot, people who are kind of like, oh, I'm lonely and I don't want to talk to anybody. And even when I go talk to people, they judge me anyways. And if you are coaching on like the edge of this kind of like you are not in this, but like two steps one way, you end up in like the manosphere types, like women, this and that, like have lots of women in your Lambos and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
And you're not there, obviously. But the reason I bring that up is it kind of is telling us something about how society is currently going, that there's the amount of men that are over 40 that are in the scenario in which you are coaching them in is not ideal, and that also gives rise to the those people that I mentioned before that I think have got it pretty much completely wrong, honestly, in a variety of ways. But
Yeah.
like you have entered into this kind of scenario where how have you developed your coaching philosophies and how have you kind of stayed away from becoming more because you mentioned, I don't remember if it was on this show, mine or your show, but you mentioned the antisocial stuff and kind of going out and connecting with people and romantic relationships and that sort of thing. So how
Hmm.
do you keep the focus more on the development of the individual? And because I tell people this all, like people who are single that are my friends, they're like, wow, it's never worked out for me. It's like, okay, well, yeah, but have you tried to fix this, and this, or to um develop these parts of you first? Like, well,
Yeah.
no. But it's very easy to blame everybody else but themselves. So that's basically it's very easy to blame things that are not you, but you are
Hmm.
focusing on that individual and that personal development. So how have you developed your coaching philosophies within that sort of framework? Um, cert included, but also you've had your experiences and stuff. So how have you developed that? Because, and you did mention as well that different things work for different people. Of course, it's the same way for everything. However, there's always fundamentals that
Yeah.
underlie the variations that you would then use. So like how have you developed the fundamental like aspects of how you coach?
So yeah, it's coming from that need of, and it's always back to the system and society. It's like I feel like since the pandemic, this the world just has adjusted in a certain way that's almost upside down from the way it was before, and especially socially. Like we are a social creature, and whether you admit it or not, like we need that connection. It's part of what makes us happy. It's part of like what helps us to grow and become more healthy people. It's part of that well-being. And for me, that that really resonated with who I am because I'm really trying to coach people of where, they may not walk the same path, but they were at a core essence. Like we're just a product of that byproduct of that system. And it's about, being okay at the end of the day, like with who you are. You don't need somebody else. You just you just want these situations because yeah, in a way you do need it, but like you love yourself enough because you have these people in your life. Like I do need that connection, like that deeper connection with not so many people, but I needed something that was deeper than what I was getting at the time because there was something there that was calling for it the whole time. And that's why I say it was like it's unlocking the version of you that's always been there, waiting to connect. We want to connect. We like you look at people that are successful, and a lot of them are social, like especially in leadership roles. Like they know how to talk to people, or they at least appear to know how to talk to people. And then you think, oh well, I'm sensitive, or I'm introvert, or I don't have those qualities. But you actually come from a place that you have. Like I always feel this about introverts, especially, is like we actually have a better grasp on language because we value the words more, because it costs more for us to say them, because it drains more of our batteries. So we're very particular and how we talk. So if if you can get past that point of that fear of like what's going to happen, what negative thing's going to happen, like I'm going to be awkward or I'm going to say this. Like a lot of it is like going out there and just understanding nobody knows what you're about to say and how it was supposed to come out. No one's judging that at all. But a lot of that is like the barrier for, at least for me in the beginning, is like, oh, if I say like if I stutter or if I say this, like if I word it wrong, like they're gonna know and they're gonna laugh at me and they're gonna tell their friends. Like nobody does that. Like maybe a very small percentage. And in my journey, it's like it's also about that rejection. Like you not everybody you approach is gonna want to talk to you, and that's great. Like you don't want to talk to everybody because like not everybody wants to go deep. It's
Hmm.
about talking to those people that really you can connect and finding those people and being able like and that's why it's huge and important to have that active listening and they call it in the practice mindful listening and seeing obstacles as opportunities for growth like if you're in traffic and you want to work on patience, this is an opportunity. Or if you want to work on your social intelligence, like, and there's a conversation that you need to have, like that conversation I needed to have with my bosses about stop work authority. This is an opportunity. Like, I'm not trying to get every one of my conversations perfect. I'm like, I need to make mistakes in those conversations in order to get to bigger, better, because it will always open up more doors. Because when you're able to speak and communicate, people respect that. People admire that. You become a better leader because of that. People connect. It's this whole social dynamic that has been almost stripped away from us, and it's replaced by this artificial thing called social media. Which
Hmm.
I see the benefit in it. It's definitely a platform but it's driven by these same corporations, the same system that's trying to keep us from the real happy. They're selling happiness as things, as like that Lambo or that beautiful wife or whatever, or like you have six girlfriends. That's gonna make you happy. No, it's not. Like those things are things. And it goes back to Dalai Lama talking about virtue is always over vice. So when you're
Hmm.
chasing vice, that is always going to end in some type of misery, some type of pain. But when you're chasing the virtues, like being forgiving, being kind, being, your authentic self, you're going to live a happier life. And that's what these corporations don't are so scared of. I believe that to my core is like that's why they're pushing out. They understand how the human brain works. But if you understand it in the right way, you can change it for the better or for the worse. So they understand it so that they can make more money and more great. And those guys aren't happy. Like there's even studies on like the more money that you make, there's no increase in happiness. Like
Yeah,
there's
it's like past a certain amount to take care of your basic needs. Like any more than that
yeah.
doesn't really matter. And to your point about the addiction, like like there's been I think articles and news that these social media companies have made the algorithms more addicting to the human brain, different
Oh
dopamine
yeah.
hits and different things like that. Um, you mentioned conversation a lot and being open to different conversation. Has the pod helped you with that, right? You as a host, right? You've had to learn how to talk to different people, and there's some where I think it's just you talking, and so you've had to figure out how to just talk to a camera by yourself as well. That's a very difficult skill, but how's that been for you? What are some of the things that you like were surprised by when you first started? Things that you've learned along the way, things that you've enjoyed, things that yeah, just talk to me about your experience as somebody who also does that. I'm always interested to hear other people's journeys into the podcast space, especially interviewing people. So yeah, what are those sorts of things? Things that you've learned, things that surprised you, things that you like, things that you don't like, all the above.
Yeah, no, and one of the things that really like it's definitely helped me a lot with, understanding when to speak, when to have conversations, like having, being able to monitor what I'm saying, having a clear voice. In the beginning, it was scary because like one of my first podcasts I did was actually on fear, the fear of talking about ADHD, and that one actually is really good. But like it was hard because like I thought it would be easier than it was because like I actually am a hip hop artist, and I've done a lot of, I've done interviews, and I've come from a place where it was like, but I've never done it clean. And, I never did it to the point where I'm like, okay, maybe I need to follow some type of format and script. And, that was interesting, but once I started getting like the interviews, I was like, wow, yeah, I need to get more of those because like they're a lot easier to like edit, and I don't have to figure out like what I'm gonna say and like, but like honestly, and I thought in the beginning that that's what would bring people to who I like to my podcast and grow my audience. And that does to a degree. And I'm not discarding that. But it's like they came to my podcast to hear me. So it's okay, and it might even be preferable for me to talk about things just by have a solo cast, where I talk about different things. And, I do actually do one a lot, on a lot of my podcasts, I have this thing called street interviews. So I've stopped people in all over Washington, D.C., Frederick, Shepherdstown, like you name it, around this area. I've tried to stop people, and I get people to talk about the things on my show that I've just met on the street, which gives me like it gives me kind of like this like boots on the ground type of knowledge that you're not going to get from the internet, that you're getting actual feedback from real people. And it also shows like it's social proof. Like, hey, I can I can do what I'm coaching. You can do this too. I may have like an ulterior motive to stop these people, but sometimes I go out and I can't get anybody, and I've had times where I've gotten like 10 or more people to just, so now I'm in that middle ground of like, but I had to start with like it's okay if nobody, like if one person goes on there, if nobody goes, like I come out here, like the conversations that I have off camera are better, usually better than the ones that I have, and that was for me. That helps to develop me, and that helps to develop the conversations that I have in my life, and like I said, opening up doors, and there's always challenges, and the people that I've met are just amazing. Like, and it gets me out of that like sense of like, well, I know I'm like the authority over here and like I need to know everything. No, it opens up that humility and that love of learning. Like, what can I learn from anybody, on the street, like, and that's where I had to adjust my interview style was like I would come from this place of like I would want a specific answer or I would try to gear it. And sometimes I do that to a degree because like I have like a flow for it, but it's
Yeah.
more in like a curious way where I allow them to like I'll be rewatching the interviews and I'll be like, wow, I just cut her off and she could have really like expounded upon that, instead of me just being like on to the next question. And it was a little bit of nerves and just like I said, it's making those mistakes because I can always go back and look at those things like you do with your soccer and just be like look at the game film or remember what you did in that situation and be like, well, yeah, okay, I did that, but maybe I could do this next time. Maybe I
Mm.
could listen here, or maybe I could talk about this in this way. It's always room for improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched some of the early ones back, like as I was going through the first maybe 20 or so episodes. And then
Yeah.
I kind of I stopped because what had happened was I was worried during the interviews that I was going to say something wrong instead of just listening. And so for me, I like I totally get what you're saying. And then I tried it and it didn't work. And then the next couple were not so good. And then I stopped listening back and I just let it flow natural.
Yeah.
Because at that point you're 25, 30 episodes in, so 40, whatever. And every conversation is different. The flow to every conversation is a little bit different, right? They all fall within the same kind of structure, um but yeah, I just figured I was like, yeah, you know what? At this point, I've got like a couple thousand hours worth of stuff on the internet. I'm sure I've made mistakes. And
Oh yeah.
if I'm worried about them, then like that's not helpful. And it just like we said on your episodes, like goldfish brain, on to the next one, on to the next one. Um,
Yeah.
so do you have any, well, tell the people where they can find your stuff again. Give the links and the socials and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And thanks for so much for having me on. It's been a great conversation. If you'd like to hear more from what I'm sharing, you can always check out my podcast. Don't mind me. I just have ADHD, where I dive into the real stories and strategies and tools for navigating life with ADHD and beyond. I also have that gift, like I said in the beginning, for your listeners, the self-discovery journal designed to help you reflect, reset, and reconnect with yourself in a simple, practical way. You can grab that at youradhdguy.com. And for anyone ready to go deeper, I offer a 5 session coaching experience called the Connection Blueprint. It's a powerful framework to help men over 40 with ADHD, depression, or addiction break through isolation, build that confidence, and communicate in ways that create real connection. It's about moving from feeling stuck to actually feeling seen and supported. So there's a lot of options there,
Very
hopefully.
nice, very nice. Any last nickels before we get you out of here? We've done between the two of us almost 2.5 hours. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. You can find all that stuff on youradhdguy.com. The coaching stuff is in the personal development, or if you just want to do a quick 30-minute discovery call, just figure out like if you even if where you want to go or if I'm a good fit. Um, yeah, if like I'll just say, like believe in yourself. And if you can't believe in yourself, believe what other people are talking about. Believe that they believe that in and see that in you.
Very nice,
So,
very nice. For those listening, thank you for listening. Check the stuff out in the description. Lots of great stuff. Take advantage of the free gift that he's given to you guys. And thank you for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you want to watch another episode like this one, click there. If you want to subscribe, click there.